Right, well, nearing closer to Christmas, folks, and we are moving down the list of my gaming week for Christmas. Yesterday, we did my picks for the best in class across 20 gaming genres. Hope you enjoyed that one. Today, we're taking a little trip down memory lane, folks, for the top 25 pre-Steam PC games that rival modern classics. Now, in all honesty, I have not tried to objectively make a top 25 list. It's not a list of that sort. What I've done, because tomorrow I am looking at my top 100 games ranked by hours logged on Steam, what I did is I kind of estimated the games I spent most time on outside of those 100 that I played for whatever reason not on Steam, okay? Most of them predate Steam, but there's a few which are probably on Steam, or they're on Steam now, that I played on another format, like iPad or something like that, okay? But generally speaking, we're looking at 25 older games. So without further ado, let us make a start. This should be a little bit shorter than the one yesterday. Now, before we get going, I know there's a Steam sale on at the moment, and I know it's Christmas, so these videos are going to encourage you to spend all your money on Steam games. Well, don't do that. Buy a course at the academic agency. Buy it now. I know you're going to buy the Steam games instead, but I just thought I'd slip this in there. All right, let's get going. We're going to start with number 25, and it's one I did mention yesterday, Jack the Ripper from 1995. One of the very few games in history that actually makes you feel like a detective. Rock hard. Plenty of replayability value too. If you run out of time or if you go wrong, Jack the Ripper will kill you as well. So it's a pretty good detective game. And as far as I know, there's nothing quite like it ever to have been made before nor since. Number 24 is a little game called Reigns. Now, that is almost certainly on Steam. I played it on iPad when it first came out. And it's pretty good if you're interested in politics, because it has these 4 win or loss, these kind of 8 loss conditions across 4 vectors. And the 4 vectors are the classical 4 castes. There's the priests, the peasants, the warriors or the nobility, and the merchants. And if the merchants get too rich, or if the priests get too powerful, etc., you end up getting overthrown by that social caste. In the same way, if they get too weak, then there are loss conditions, like, for example, if the merchants get too weak, your economy goes bust. If the priests get too weak, I think there's a pagan takeover, etc., etc. So there are lots of loss conditions. If the peasants get too strong, they're kind of like a peasant revolution or communist revolution. If they get too weak, obviously there's nobody to work, etc., etc. So there are lots of interesting mechanics there. And the whole game is driven just by choices that it gives you. One of the interesting things about Reigns is that no matter how long you play it, there are very few repeated decisions. You have to play it a lot to start coming up against the same decisions again and again, and you can have different kings, different reigns, and you build up a history, with a number of runs. So it's pretty good in that respect. Neat little game, Reigns. Number 23, Age of Wonders Shadow Magic. I mentioned it yesterday. I had that as a boxed version back in the day. And as I said yesterday, one of the all-time best turn-based strategy games, on par, or you could even argue it surpasses the Heroes of Might and Magic games. Number 22, and I should mention, by the way, that yesterday I was picking the best in class, and I was giving honourable mentions, and I was trying to be a little bit more objective. In this list, I am going with a more how much time have I spent playing it. Genuinely, if I had to think, what are the games I spent most time playing, not on Steam, what would they be? And so, yeah, if there's a few little contradictions, that is the reason, okay? Number 22 is Pizza Tycoon. Ugly as sin old game, but my gosh, is it full of detail. One of the most in-depth, cunningly in-depth restaurant simulator games imaginable. I mean, the level of detail in Pizza Tycoon boggles the mind. I don't think any modern restaurant simulators have that. I mean, you can even order down to like grains of oregano in this game. There are different cities, there are contacts, there's like an underworld in it. It really is a very detailed simulation of running a pizza business. Number 21, very old game, perhaps the oldest game that I'm going to consider today because it's all the way back from the 1980s, and that is 1988's Hidden Agenda, one of the most interesting political simulators ever made. It's kind of a precursor to Tropico in some ways, but it's somehow less cartoony and more realistic than that. It's a little bit like Reigns, where it's mainly driven by decisions you make, running some Latin American country or some dictatorship somewhere. But it's a very interesting political simulation. There are different factions you have to appease. There are different people in your cabinet you have to appoint. And it's a careful balancing act. One of the few games to actually try to simulate politics in any great detail. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. And I quite like menu-driven DOS games of that late 80s era for some reason. Don't make them like that anymore. Number 20 is a game that is pretty difficult to get running on modern systems, but it's worth the effort. Chaos Overlords, which is kind of like a board game. It's kind of like a card game in a way, but you're running a gang, and there are different gang members that you have. There's a bit of territory and area control in there, but Chaos Overlords, well worth seeking out. Lost many an hour on that one back in the day. Last time I tried to play it, I couldn't get it to run. Just the screen went white. I did manage to get it run eventually. I think I ended up running a virtual version of Windows 95 just to get it to go. But maybe there's a new patch or something that you can get. 19 is an unusual game called Der Clue, or The Clue. It looks like a point-and-click adventure, but it's actually more detailed than that because you are playing as a kind of mobster for hire, and you have to plan thefts and robberies, and you do little jobs in that game. So even though you're looking at a kind of point-and-click adventure game, once you get into it, you can actually plan. It goes into like an overhead planning view, and you get to do all sorts of interesting things. So a unique game, really. And I've been waiting for something like that to be remade. There was a game called Door Kickers, which I'll mention tomorrow because I think I spent like a few hours on it, which gets into the lower echelons of the top 100, which has something like that top-down view from The Clue. But really, there's nothing that's ever been made like it. Unique game. And there was a sequel, which was Pants. Number 18, Sid Meier's Covert Action. Again, completely unique game. That also has some interesting overhead segments that are, I suppose, reminiscent of what you see in the Clue. Sid Meier famously disliked this game and came up with something called the Covert Action Rule, because he reckoned that the typical gamer could not keep the disparate elements of the game into an overarching story. Well, Sid Meier, you weren't thinking of me. I play this game with a notepad, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. If you actually take it seriously, note things down, and truly take it on as a CIA agent might, as you play a CIA agent in the game, you'll get a lot more out of it, and you can actually kind of see how quickly you can figure out the various different schemes. It's a pretty hard game, actually. Most of the time, the mastermind gets away in a couple of moves or whatever, so you have to be pretty on the ball. It's also different every time out as well. Number 17 is Constructor. This is Constructor, a game that came out in the late 90s. It's kind of a real-time strategy game. It's got a lot of British charm to it.
What do you want? Hello?
British elements. The accents, the voice acting, tellies, videos, Okie Kokie 2000. I enjoyed Constructor. You play a kind of landlord and you have these tenants, some of which are scumbag tenants, and then it kind of it's very class conscious as a game. Kind of goes up the social echelons and you're aiming to get kind of higher and higher class of tenant. Yeah, I enjoy Constructor. I have to be honest, after a while, it starts getting a little bit too hectic, starts getting a bit too fast, and you play against enemy landlords too. And I never really liked the game when it got into those later stages. It all got a bit too much. But still, again, unique. Nothing quite like it ever to have been made. You can do all sorts of things in it. You could do skullduggery, like you could hire out a hippie to go and picket your rival landlords' houses to cause trouble, and you could open shops, and there's all sorts of things you could do in Constructor. Number 16, another game I mentioned yesterday, Deus Ex. Again, unique game, part FPS, part RPG, part adventure game, part detective game. It's really never been bettered for what it does. I didn't like the sequels as much. I know there are a number of later Deus Ex games. I remember nowhere near as good. The writing in Deus Ex is great. The one of the best things of it is the explorability of the world. The computers, the ATM machines, all the little incidental details, so lovingly put together, Deus Ex. And I really do feel that games these days, even though they may look better graphically and so on, they tend to lack those little details, Number 15 is a game, it used to be called Trevor Chan's Capitalism 2. Now it is called Capitalism Lab. That is Capitalism Lab. And it's one of the most in-depth business simulators ever made. I actually think they use it to teach economics classes. But I love it. I think it's really in-depth. You cannot get it on Steam, which is why it's on this list. Keeps on being updated. They're always dropping new DLCs. I mean, it looks, the graphics are nothing to write home about, as you can see here. But the complexity, the supply chains, the logistical problems, you can get involved in the stock market, you can get involved in internet companies, you can get involved in all sorts of things. You can try to play as a supermarket retailer. You can try to play last time I played, I tried to make it purely selling cigars, for example. I opened up a tobacco farm and a cigar manufacturing plant, and that was it, So there's all sorts of different challenges you can set yourself. Capitalism Lab, fantastic game. It does also veer towards like real life capitalism, where after a certain point you can just start playing the stock market. You forget about actually trying to run companies. You can just make an absolute mint playing the stock market. And I've made billions in that game before doing that. Shame I couldn't do it in real life, eh? Buy a course, ladies and gentlemen, academic agency. Anyway, number 14, Heroes of Might and Magic 2. Again, a game I mentioned yesterday, and you'll notice that I've put it above Age of Wonders Shadow Magic, because I spent longer on it, and it has a deeper place in my heart, right? This is a more subjective list. The one yesterday was more objective. You got it? Yeah, I love Heroes of Might and Magic. One of the best soundtracks of any game. I love the visual style. I always preferred the visual style of Heroes 2 to Heroes 3. Yeah, just a lovely game, perfectly balanced as well. And I mean, I busted it out like a year or so ago. Holds up well, still fun, you know. Number 13 is Imperium Galactica 2, a game I feel that only I ever talk about, or only I have ever mentioned. But this was a wonderful, it's kind of like 4X game with RTS elements. So there was like a space component where you could have like a turn-based game in space. There was a bit down on the planets where you could actually fight like a tank war turned into an RTS, and then there was a strategic overhead kind of in the galaxy 4X component. There was also a component where you built your own ships and you added guns to them. It's just all sorts of things all in one game. The big problem with Imperium Galactica 2 is they tried to graft on a story to it, but honestly, after the first couple, like 10 minutes or so, you never think about the story again. It just kind of imposes itself right at the start. Great game, really underrated, and I believe they remastered it or they brought it out again, so that one actually might be on Steam now. I had it again, big box version back in the day, but number 12 is Warcraft 3. Like I said yesterday, one of the greatest games. I think it's the best in class for the RTS genre. Now, for a long time, this was not on. In fact, I think it's still not on Steam. They've remastered it, right? But that company, Blizzard, explicitly does not go on Steam, right? So you can't buy it on Steam. Even now, I have no idea how the new version plays, but I had the old one again, big box version back in the early 2000s. It was wonderful. Wonderful time to be a gamer. Now is a wonderful time to be a gamer, by the way, because you can still play all these games. And there are great games coming out all of the time. I'm not one of these curmudgeons, by the way, who thinks like everything was better back in the day. There are fantastic games coming out all the time. And tomorrow, when I go through my Steam list, I'll talk you through a number of recent games that I've been playing that have over... Well, what's this threshold? 3.7 hours. All right. Number 11 is Thief 2. Again, I mentioned it yesterday. Now, presumably you can buy this on Steam now, or at least on Good Old Games. Again, I had it, a boxed version back in the day, and it was a fantastic experience. The first game also, really well-crafted missions, great sense of atmosphere. Thief was a wonderful game. And the second one in particular was even better. Number 10, another one I mentioned yesterday, Magic the Gathering, Chandelier. I spent many an hour on that. Got me, single-handedly really, got me into card games of that nature. I later played real-life versions like Seven Wonders and other deck builders, and more recently I got into the roguelike deck builder craze that's been happening in the past few years too. But the Chandelier, again, I think this is another really difficult one to run on modern systems. There's it's ironic really. Old DOS games are really easy to play, but games for Windows 95, 98 sort of time, there's a kind of dark spot there where for some reason those games are really hard to play on Windows 11 systems. I don't know why that is. There's probably a good reason for it, but but this Chandelier game is one of them. Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is my number 9. Now you'll see I didn't mention it yesterday because I objectively think Age of Wonders Shadow Magic is a better game, but my god, Heroes 3 was the granddaddy of them all, wasn't it? It was a fantastic turn-based strategy game, huge roster, everything perfect, the balance between the different factions, so many different things you could do, so many upgrades, epic soundtrack, epic storyline. Heroes 3 is goated, really, to be honest. But I still maintain my picks from yesterday Shadow Magic and Battle Brothers arguably are objectively better games than Heroes 3. And if there's massive Heroes 3 fan there, listen, I love the game as well, right? I'm not like I don't want to start an argument. Number 8 is Sid Meier's Colonization. Many an hour, single-handedly taught me American history, got me interested in it at the very least. The founding fathers, and I always went the English against the dastardly Dutch and French who were in the game as well, and the Portuguese. Just a great game. You could trade with the natives, you could take over the natives, you could fight, you could eventually declare independence, of course. And honestly, I think Colonization, it was just as good as Civilization, and I always saw them together. They brought it back out for the Civ 4 engine. There was like a later version. It didn't quite have the charm, but it was still a good game, and I sunk a good few hours into that, into the kind of remade version of it as well that they brought out sometime in the 2000s. Colonization is a very underrated game. Number 7, now we're getting up into games I really love here. Unique games, games that have never been equaled, games that have never been tried again. And that is the movies. That is Lionhead Studios, the movies. Now, I've noticed that recently a number of games have tried to copy the movies. I've bought them, but I haven't tried them because they're still kind of in their early stages. One of them was called Movies Tycoon. Another one was called... what was the other one called? There was Movies Tycoon, Blockbuster Inc. Now, from what I've seen of those games, they are directly inspired by the movies, but I don't think that they quite have the production values and the charm of the original. I had a career on there. You can watch the movies that Morcar made in his last outing. There are a couple of little annoyances with movies, like the kind of you could do without the having to try to manage the stars' moods and things like that, and all of their habits. I mean, I kind of just want to get on with the business of making movies. But generally speaking, it's got a great feel for the different eras. One of the things I love about the movies starts in the 1930s, goes through to the 40s, 50s, and each era has got its own look and feel and costumes. It's a wonderful game, really, really wonderful game, and nobody's ever attempted really to equal that. Although there are these two new upstarts that are still, I think, kind of being developed. Another game that has never been equaled, and not even close to being equaled. Its sequel was bad. The people who tried to copy it later, like there was a game called Omerta, there was a game called City of Gangsters. I mean, they were all just pants. Is Gangsters Organized Crime. Gangsters Organized Crime is by far the best gangster simulator game ever made. And the level of detail in this one, right? The graphics may look basic. Every single business in this game has an owner. It has a particular line of work. You can actually go in and bribe them or extort them or pay them off or buy the business and run it yourself or put somebody else in there. It is so detailed, the world of Gangsters Organized Crime. It's actually a marvel. This game, Gangsters, and Pizza Tycoon are the two old games that I always marvel at just how much detail is in there. They don't bother with stuff like that anymore. There's not enough of that kind of extraordinary detail. I mean, there are some, obviously, which we'll get to, but in general, I love these quirky older titles that just manage to pack so much in. I love Gangsters Organized Crime. Again, a little bit like Constructor, towards the later stages, it gets a bit hectic. You start feeling a bit hemmed in by the opponents and so on, but It's got a lot of charm. Like a lot of the other games, like Chandelier, and like the original Constructor, which I think they remade, and one or two of the others I've talked about, Chaos Overlords, it's very difficult to work on modern systems. Last I checked, I think there was a patch, because Gangsters was another one I was desperate to play again, and I ended up like running a virtual machine with Windows 95 on it just to play Gangsters. But there's actually a patch now that means you can play Gangsters Organised Crime from the luxury of your modern system, and it works perfectly. Number 5 is Total Extreme Wrestling. The latest version I think was 2020. There may be a new version coming out. I always mod it to a historical mod from the 80s. Typically I've played one called Death of the Territories that starts in 1983. But this one that I'm showing you here starts in 1992, and it has all real wrestlers in there with their real, pictures. And there's, again, extraordinary detail in these games, in those databases, if you get the right ones. And basically, you play as the booker. You book shows. You pick who's the faces, who's the heels, what the matches are. You write the angles. And it's just like a storytelling device. Total Extreme Wrestling. Great way to play Fantasy Booker. And hours of time you can spend, playing out your fantasies as a booker. And boy, do I have some fantasies as a booker. I even worked out an entire formula once. I had a spreadsheet, a roster of jobbers, and a complete formula of like when the heel would come in, what matches he would have, who he would face. Oh, it was an extraordinary level of detail I got into. Anyway, I won't bore you with them. Number 4 is Europa 1400, The Guild. Another extraordinary game with extraordinary level of detail. So many different jobs you can do in this game. Different businesses you can run. All of it simulated. The entire economy simulated. You can become a banker in this game and give out loans and act as a loan shark or a money lender, or you can become a thief or a grave robber, a tailor, a baker, a landlord, a priest even. Extraordinary game. You can get involved in politics. You can get involved in all sorts. The Guild 2, pants. The third Guild game, pants. Renaissance, pants. Europa 1400, The Guild, is where it's at. It's an extraordinary game. Again, never equaled. Nobody's attempted to try to make this game again. They went the version of trying to make it The Sims or some bullshit. This was the game. This one. Anyway, number 3, Sid Meier's Civilization 4, which again, I had in a big box version back in the day. Fantastic game. In fact, was it a big box or would it have been... Did Civ 4 come out in the era where it was the smaller kind of DVD slipcase? I feel like they had a bigger box, Civ 4. I'm interested now. Excuse me a second, folks. I'm going to look that up. Yeah, I was right. It did come in a big box. I knew it. It came in a big box. And so did the colonization one as well. I'm looking at them now. What year did Civ 4 come out? Civilization 4. 2005. Okay, that must have been the very end of the big box titles. 2005, because they went down to the lame little kind of slipcases after that. Anyway, what can I say that hasn't been said about Civ 4 before? I mean, it's just the pinnacle of the genre. Like I said, it defines the 4X genre. And for me, is the best of the Civ games. Or at least it's the most fun. I do think that there were a few strategies that could get a bit cheesy in Civ 4. Cottage spam, famously. You could build those old stacks of Doom as well in Civ 4, the massive armies and so on. And some of the more modern Civs, like Civ 6, for example, has a much greater sense of constriction about what you're allowed to do. And with that sense of restriction, actually comes a bit more challenge. So, but for fun, Civ 4 was fantastic. And I think part of the struggle that a lot of people had moving from Civ 4 to Civ 5 and then later to Civ 6 was that those strategies no longer worked and they were very wedded to them. And that was the frustration I had initially with Civ 5. I got over it, though. The Civ series is high quality, and I don't think there's any real need to get precious about any particular edition. Civ 3 was good, as was Civ 2 and the original, of course. Number 2 is the Baldur's Gate trilogy. Now, strictly speaking, I should say it's Baldur's Gate 2, but I like to put it all together in a big modded edition called Baldur's Gate Trilogy, which puts all of Baldur's Gate 1, all of the expansions of Baldur's Gate 1, all of Baldur's Gate 2, and the expansion of Throne of Bor, and also that Beamdog extra bit that they put in the middle, all into one big game, and I play it like that. Epic, brilliant, the best RPG ever made. I will start a new game once every couple of years. Whether I ever get through them all is time dependent, of course. As we'll talk about tomorrow, life gets in the way of my gaming life a lot. So I often start things and then never go back to them. But Baldur's Gate will always be my number one RPG. It's just got everything. I once did a whole stream on Baldur's Gate, which you can go back and find in the back catalogue. And number one, of course, is Dwarf Fortress. Now, Dwarf Fortress is actually available on Steam now, believe it or not, but for a long time it wasn't. Let me tell you something. I remember printing out the manual, the Wikipedia that somebody had put together for Dwarf Fortress. I did it at work once, and the size of that was the size of a book, like a thick book. And I took it home, and I remember reading all the page. Like the level of depth is extraordinary in Dwarf Fortress. I've mentioned before, you can get your little dwarves to put little etchings on the tiles, right? They can do like little engravings. Then you can click on the little engraving they've done, and it gives a description of what the engraving was. And it will be some like historical detail which has been generated by the game itself. It self-develops its own lore, its own world, its own universe, its own... I mean, it is just... I've never known anything like it. Dwarf Fortress is one of the marvels of modern science. It's one of the wonders of the modern world. It's just that you haven't quite realised it yet. Dwarf Fortress may be the most incredible game ever devised by a human being. You just haven't realised it yet. And those people who have realised it, they'll know. And you'll let me know, because you're better than the normal person if you've conquered Dwarf Fortress. Of course, nobody ever has conquered it, because no matter how good you get at Dwarf Fortress, eventually it will kick you in the nuts. Something will happen and end up killing all of your dwarves. Like your entire base will come to nothing. And there'll be some bullshit, you forgot to plug up a hole and water's got down in it and it's flooded the whole place. Or, I don't know, a cat has died somewhere and it's spread germs and it got into your food supply and now everybody's got a deadly disease. Or, I don't know, some massive beast turns up and kills everybody, but dying is fun, of course. Strike the earth! Alright, that'll do for today. I'll be back tomorrow with a much longer video going through my top 100 games by play hours on Steam. Let me know some of your favourite games from the pre-Steam era, and I'll see you tomorrow. And have a good Christmas, everybody. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. You can join the channel for thousands of hours of past shows in the archive and hundreds of videos. If you have any questions, you can leave a super chat or a super thanks, and I'll be sure to pick it up during my weekly office hours, which run every Tuesday afternoon. I also provide courses at the academic agency, which I encourage people to buy. Thousands of students now have taken the Trivium to improve their skills in writing, logic and rhetoric. just 3 of many courses available. Buy it now. But most importantly of all, friends, get out.